This is our 2023 Muskoka Vital Signs report. This tends to come out towards the end of the year now. I used to try and get it out a little bit early, but it seems that our schedule has been pushing us a little further into December to get it out. But the benefit of that is we can try and capture as much current information in the year that it's produced as possible. So just a little bit about the Muskoka Community Foundation for those who don't know much about us. We were founded in 2007 by a group of volunteers who wanted to find a way to help donors keep their philanthropic gifts in Muskoka and to help facilitate that. And so our goal is to help donors reach their philanthropic goals, to promote the important roles that charities play in supporting Muskoka. Currently, we administer just over $2 million across 20 endowed and flowed through funds. And since 2007, we've dispersed more than $2 million in grants to registered charities in Muskoka and the surrounding areas. Some of that $2 million would come through some of the national granting programs that we have access to administer through the Community Foundations of Canada. Just put that up there for a second. That's our current board of directors. So we have representation from fairly across Muskoka, and that changes year to year. And they bring a individual and unique set of skills, much like I'm sure your board does. And this was nice to put together, actually, because I'm generally the only one working on the Vital Signs report, and you kind of dive into the report in a current year, and you kind of forget about what you did the year before. So it was great putting this slide together to see the three covers, which all, interestingly enough, have kind of that natural environment theme to them, which I think is what people think about when we talk about Muskoka. If you were to say Muskoka to when I'm out and about beyond the borders of Muskoka and I say, oh, this is where I'm from, I think this is what people think about, right? They're not thinking about maybe the individual towns, but it's kind of that iconic windswept tree or the water, that sort of thing. And this most recent cover in 2023 was put together by the visual arts class out of Gravenhurst High School. They had adopted the Vital Signs report to their high school during the 2021 reports. They have 2 sets in their library that can be checked out for classroom use or student use. And so I asked them, I said, would you like to be involved in putting out our next report? And the M.A. Bullock, who's the visual arts teacher, jumped on the opportunity and had her class put this together. I don't know if I have, no, I didn't include it, but I have a great photo of them working on the cover and the process they went through. So what I thought I would do today is just kind of guide us through the report. And I think most of you here in the room have a copy. So these little graphics, of course, don't capture everything that we cram into the 2-page section for each theme. But I thought these would be great ways to create some talking points. And really, I didn't think I'd spend a lot of time going through the actual environment section of the report because, well, really most of it's populated by the Muskoka Watershed Council's report card that you put out. And we're very thankful for the work that you do in that area and that we're able to direct readers of the report back to the work that you're doing. And that's really our primary focus when we put information in the Vital Signs report. We're only here to facilitate the information, to collate the information for the reader. We think it's really important to direct people back to the original source so that they can then go and do their own homework, ask questions, investigate further. And of course, we're always happy to help guide them to the right people to speak to if they're interested in a particular topic. So I think the Muskoka environment section took me the longest to compile, only because your report card is so fulsome, and reading through that and trying to decide what I thought would be most important and catch the reader's attention, because that's really what we want to do. We want to draw them in. We want them to understand kind of the highlights of a particular issue that we're discussing, and then we want them to want to learn more or to have conversations, or when they're sitting around, at a dinner party and the environment comes up, they can say, well, did you know? This is where you should go to learn more. So thank you for that work that you do. And often I get asked, why is the environment in your report when all the other sections don't really, they're more about the kind of the social, the human aspect of what's happening in Muskoka. And so I always tell them that we include the environment amongst the topics of food security or insecurity, economic health, income security, mental health and wellness, et cetera. And the purpose of that is because a vital signs report is to capture the health and vitality of a community. And it's important to view the environment with an intersectional lens to gain a better understanding of the important role that the natural landscape plays in contributing to a healthy Muskoka. Muskoka has often been identified as one of the best places to visit in Canada and also as one of the most popular vacation spots in the world. And I'm sure, like you, I can go anywhere in the country or even abroad and say, oh, I live in Muskoka. And they're like, oh, yeah, I've heard of that. I know where that is. In 2011 and again in 2012, National Geographic declared Muskoka as one of the top destinations in the world to visit. As you know, the amount of lakes and and parks that are encompassed here in Muskoka is plentiful. And so it's really important that we talk about the role that the environment plays. And we'll kind of, and so my goal is, as we go through this presentation, is that I'll try to link back each section to the environment, as I'm sure that these are topics that you discuss in your work as well. So economic health and income security. So one of the issues we have when we do this report is that we're trying to put a lot of information in a very small space. And so if you look through the report, you'll see that we highlight the importance of a living wage rates, how they've increased over time. Some would say probably not enough. The Ontario minimum wage, occupations in Muskoka, which I'm going to relate back to the environment, Muskoka's environment, and our labor market too, which there's also a direct correlation. So in our 2018 report, we captured that according to Statistics Canada, there were 3 million person visits to Muskoka in 2016, with 1.9 million of those visits occurring between July and September, and nearly $500 million in visitor spending, with the food and beverage and accommodation and retail sectors accounting for the bulk of visitor spending. As Muskoka has become better known as a four-season destination, the tourism industry continues to play an important role in the local economy and a major source of employment, with many visiting the region to participate in boating, and camping at provincial and national parks, hiking, camping, viewing wildlife. It's important to recognize that Muskoka's economies are based on a healthy and diverse ecosystem. It's important to consider the impact of a healthy environment on income security. Muskoka is often considered as an affluent cottage vacation destination, but this idyllic version of the region obscures the economic reality among the population. Muskoka, like many rural communities, faces challenges in addressing poverty and helping the community's most vulnerable people. A barrier faced by many living at or below the poverty line is the reality that many jobs in the tourism, construction, and service industry are part-time and seasonal, and any disruptions within these industries can have a devastating and long-lasting impact on individual households. I think we could see that happen this winter with the really short ice-in season that we had. I know when I look out my front window, I see a lot of activity, ice fishing, a lot of dock repairs. So, equipment going out on the lake, lumber being moved around by local contractors. And that really didn't happen this year. In 2020, the volume of economic activity decreased by 4.5% due to the impacts of the pandemic. And one of the most impacted sectors was the tourism industry. While not directly related to the health of the environment, this sudden change in the way people were able to interact with Muskoka's natural landscape highlighted how integrated Muskoka's environment is with its economy. So housing and homelessness. Oops, and we'll just move this here. Housing and homelessness. So in the report, we focused on the increasing cost of non-waterfront home ownership. But equally important, and not covered in this particular report, is the amount of significant development of seasonal and second homes along Muskoka's shorelines. And it's easy to see how any change in Muskoka's environment, big or small, can very quickly impact the region as a whole, as well as creating tensions between economic growth and environmental stewardship. And I think we've seen that with some of the developments that have been proposed on some of the larger lakes. We see that with some of the issues that arise when, properties are being developed even for personal use along the shoreline. It's quite interesting to us, and a graphic that I wasn't able to pop up here on the slide, but if you look at 2016 in the report under home ownership for a non-waterfront home, the average price of a non-waterfront home was $244,000. In 2022, we saw that go as high as $718,000. And partway through 2023, we saw that dip a little bit back down to $685,000. But as we know with the conversations we've had on building affordable housing, what are the considerations that we have to make to, provide that supply of affordable housing for people living in Muskoka? And how do we mitigate the environmental impacts that may come from that? Again, not something that we haven't covered within the report specifically, but things that come up in conversations we have, and I think conversations that are happening around the district. Moving on to food insecurity, we focused, in the previous two reports, we referred to food insecurity as food security. And it was through the work, our partnership with the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit, that we understood the importance of making that distinction. So in this report, we refer to people who are food insecure. We refer to this section where we cover that as food insecurity, making the distinction between food security, where we're talking about the supply of food and interruptions into the supply chain. And so while we don't necessarily talk about food security in this report in depth, it's also another important consideration when we're talking about the environment, the health of our environment, the impacts of climate change, on how that could potentially disrupt the food supply chain coming into Muskoka. And we saw some of that happen with the disruptions of the pandemic, especially in the early part of the pandemic. We did see the importance of being able to keep, stocked shelves, basically. So then how do we work with local food producers, and how are they impacted by environmental change? Something to consider, something that I think about as I put this report together, and thinking about how we start incorporating that into future reports. Also, the number of food banks, I think, well, I'm not directing this back to necessarily the environment, but the number of food banks and food insecurity programs we have in Muskoka is quite alarming, I think. We have 10 active food banks that operate across the district. We have probably 10 or more food insecurity programs, like Out of the Cold, different food programs, meal programs that are offered, organizations like The Door that serves high school kids. They feed 100 kids twice a week at The Door, coming in for a free lunch, and a place to just have community and to know where they can come when in crisis. We have a new organization called Food for Kids, which is filling the gap on weekends for kids that are in food insecure homes. And they now, they started late last year as a new organization to Muskoka, but they are now operating across, they're in their 11th school. They've just started delivering weekend meal programs or food programs to the Port Severn area. And so really important to think about, we can easily tie food insecurity back to an uncertain economy, income, the health of economic health and income security. Those things are all related. So each report, we have one section that we will rotate out and bring in some new information. Most of the report stays fairly consistent each edition. And we do that so that the reader knows when they pick up a vital signs report, they know what they're seeing. They know what to expect. They know the topics that we're going to cover. But we try to add some new information every edition. And so this year we came back to when in need. Who are those that are there for us when we're in crisis? And so we highlighted our first responders and the roles they play, and to provide a little bit of information so people understand, thinking about fire response, right? If our fire departments, understanding that they're largely volunteer run. There are paid staff and those volunteers are remunerated in some way, but we do have to rely on volunteers, and those organizations work really hard on volunteer recruitment to have new firefighters come in. Our paramedics, the vast area that they cover, and even our policing, the vast geographic area they have to cover. And I think because a lot of people are unaware, I think especially those that live here, but also those that visit here, are unaware of sometimes the sparse coverage we have in first responders. And I think it's even more significant as I was driving in today, thinking when I go home, I have to secure a few things down on the dock because the water is getting high. Thinking back again to 2019 and the floods and the immense impact that had on our first responders, municipalities, towns, districts, and what was required to respond to that emergency. And so we wanted to kind of highlight, this is how you're served when in crisis in Muskoka. And this is how we can, highlighting the work around emergency preparedness or the importance of emergency preparedness. And then some of those key organizations we included in the report, who are there when you are in crisis, who you call, who comes to assist you. So again, not directly related to the environment, but in a way it is. We can see the intersections of emergency preparedness, natural disasters, things we know that may increase, whether it's a winter storm event, power outage due to ice, flooding. Those things are all related back to the importance of a healthy environment in Muskoka. Thinking about health and wellness, again, I just pulled out a couple of highlights from the report to fill this slide, but one that we've carried over from the previous report is the graphic on the right, that these are the things that impact the health and wellness of an individual or a family. So access to care, income security, food security, housing, social isolation, mental health and wellness, and the environment. And in the 2018 report, we talked about the changing Muskoka climate and how that impacts physical health and safety. The 2018 report, where we worked with the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit, and conveyed their position on climate change and how our health can be affected in a number of ways due to a changing climate. And that might include more summer heat warnings, heat-related illness and hospitalizations, more extreme storms, injuries, and community-wide emergencies, poor air quality, possibly leading to increased respiratory and cardiovascular illness, greater exposure to UV radiation, and an increase in the presence and numbers of vectors that carry diseases like West Nile or Lyme disease. And in addition to the changing weather, also going back to that food security part, how the changing climate affects water and food safety and our ability to grow food. So some really direct correlations and potential pressures on an already stressed system of healthcare in Muskoka. And so the last section that we typically include in our vital signs report is this section on intersections. And this is the graphic that we included in the report, really to demonstrate that, first of all, we're a fairly large geographical area. Muskoka is quite large. And we cover that in the first section of the report, but that we can't talk about any one thing in the report without it being connected to another thing. So while in the report we kind of have these silos or these themes that we think are important to convey, they are interconnected. And we don't have the space. We're limited by the space we have in the report to really delve into that. But where we can, we try to make those connections for people through the report. And it's certainly when we're having conversations with community, that's something we always highlight, that we can't look at these themes in isolation. We have a lot of unique characteristics in Muskoka that and that really impact how we as communities can function. And so, which kind of comes back to why we put the environment first in our report, because it really kind of sets the tone for how our economy grows, how residents in Muskoka earn a living, how they can afford housing, where their housing might be located, where housing might be located that isn't necessarily maybe in a good, maybe it's on a floodplain, maybe it's not the ideal setting, but it's a place where housing can be afforded. Transportation, how do we get around? Driving around some of the back roads in Port Carling yesterday, there's some potential for some flooding and washouts, as we saw in Port Carling, I think, last week. And I think happened across the district in a number of places last week with the increased rain, beaver dams breaking, flooding, roads being cut off, those sorts of things. So everything we talk about in the report is connected. And then the end result, I always breathe a big sigh of relief when I finish the report and it's ready and I've picked it up from the printers and I'm like, okay, I'm proud of what we were able to accomplish here, but that's not where the report ends. And we don't want it to end there. We want it to be a document that encourages people to learn more, which is why we try to link back to the original sources and encourage people when they may call and ask me a question about a specific item they read in the report. I always encourage them to go back to the original source to learn what those needs are. It can be explained better than I can. But we also want to, as the Muskoka Community Foundation, have the opportunity to speak to groups such as yourself. We want individuals to take the report and to share it with friends and family, coworkers, clients. And we just want to have conversations about what else do we need to speak about? What are we missing? What haven't we talked about? And we acknowledge that we cannot cover everything in the report, that it is only a snapshot in time. And it's very possible by the time it goes out to print, something's changed or something's evolved. And so vital conversations are really important. And out of this particular report, we've had two conversations so far. One was in March, bringing a group of individuals together, a group of organizations together, many of who are in the charitable sector, where affordable housing is a really important topic right now. So we brought groups together that might not have the opportunity in their daily work lives to be able to connect with one another. So we wanted to just have a very informal discussion about where they felt their organizations were in terms of affordable housing, what they needed to support the clients they serve in terms of affordable housing. And then just this week on Tuesday, we brought together food banks and food insecurity programs to have a conversation. Well, that was co-hosted by with the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit, who, when I reached out to them to get some data for the report, and we were having a conversation about, well, there's 10 food banks, they were like, really, we don't know all of them. Who's doing the work? So we thought, let's bring them together. And we had an amazing conversation and discussion. It was about 3 hours long, and really just learning more about the pressures they're facing as an organization, their needs, but also the needs of the clients they serve. What are the barriers that are impacting their clients? What is bringing their clients to them in the first place? And so it was a great conversation around that, a great opportunity for them to potentially collaborate with one another, to do food rescue, food distribution. So we had some great conversation. And I think we'll have more. There's an appetite to have more of those conversations. So I think we'll continue to do that.